everyone. Welcome to the Be Better podcast. I'm Dr. Perkins, your host. We have an exciting episode today called Be Better with High Road Leadership, something that's desperately needed. I have a guest who will discuss this along with me. We're going to solve all the world's problems right here, right now. Mr. Erik M. Francis, three-time author, presenter, educator extraordinaire. How you doing, Erik, today?
I'm well. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to come on and share on your forum.
Well, I appreciate you. As you know, you and I hang out from time to time, and we have some great conversations. So I just wanted to make sure we finally recorded one of those great conversations, leaving people with starting point solutions. So let's talk about high road leadership. My $1,000,000 first question is this. High road leadership is defined as rising above occasion and setting aside ego to do what's right according to moral and ethical standards. Others will add, it is setting a positive example. So my question to you is, how have you utilized high road leadership throughout your career?
You know, I think the key word, what you said, is ego, and that you got to put it aside. I have been afflicted with the curse of ego, the curse of arrogance, and I'm the first one to admit it. And probably if people are listening and probably maybe even know who I am, they're probably maybe chuckling because there is there's sometimes I give an impression that I do have a strong ego and maybe arrogant, which I have been in the past. One of the things that I've learned, and I think one of the things in terms of my growth with it and the growth of a leader, is that you have to realize you can be confident in why you do, how you do, what you do, and you can be secure in your knowledge and your philosophy, but you don't know everything. And you can't even present yourself to say that you know everything and that you know it all. And I've given that impression to sometimes some people wrongly, from my standpoint, and also from perception. One of the things I think, in terms of ego, is that you have to realize that basically it's not about you, but it's about the other person and how you can help the other person and how you can support the other person. When I talk about my concepts, which are very complex, which is about depth of knowledge, DOK, or questioning and inquiry, what I'm realizing is that the way I see it and the way I feel about it and perceive it may not be the way others feel about it or the way they perceive it. So putting my ego aside, putting in terms of high road leadership, I have to basically try, and it's not easy. I have to try to figure out how I can get others to understand, to accept, or to embrace. And it's very hard, especially with those two concepts, because number one, we've been given a lot of misinformation and misinterpretations about depth of knowledge. So now what you're doing is I'm going into places and saying, hey, the stuff we've been told has not been accurate. But now I'm doing, instead of saying you're all doing it wrong, now I'm saying, you did it right based upon what you've been taught and told, but there's new data and information. I'm going to ask you to rethink about it. You need to choose to reconsider, and that's on them. Same with questioning and inquiry. That is very, very uncomfortable. And you ask people questions, they think you need to have the answer. That's not questioning and inquiry. You ask questions not to assess, but also to activate, advance, and augment learning. And that is going back to like being the childlike wonder you have between 2 and 5, where you're asking why all the time. But because of the way we're raised and because of our experiences in school, if we're asked a question, or we even are questioned, not only do we feel challenged intellectually, but we feel challenged personally and professionally. Like, how dare you question me? So that's why I think a lot of it in terms of ego, putting that aside and trying to show that bold humility that my friend Dr. Dave Schmidt I like to talk about, and really trying to show that you're always willing to learn. And that's something that I try to do. It's hard to do in 2 to 6 hours when I'm presenting to you, but as you get to know me, you'll find out that I'm always asking questions, not to challenge you, but to challenge your thinking, and also so I can understand and learn and say, okay, so here's a situation. What could we do moving forward?
And I love your response with the ego piece of saying it's not about you in leadership, it's about others. And you can bring that expertise to the table, that knowledge, that intellect, but have a humility behind it and then help others. gain that knowledge and expertise like you have. So I appreciate hearing that, because a lot of leaders won't say that. They won't admit to that. I think if all of us were honest, we would all say at one time we had that ego. We felt ourselves. We thought we were the woman, the man, and we have to step back in leadership to realize it's not about us. It's about other people. How can you inspire your team to move forward together? So I love that about the ego.
And
What?
I think also, if I could kind of follow up on that, is that I think that's sort of the struggle you have with professional development and professional learning, the way it's been. What if I told you a lot of times when I come in for professional development, a lot of times the people I'm working with, their attitude is, what have I done wrong? And that's not what professional learning should be about. It's not about you doing something wrong. You might be doing something right, but how can we make it better? How can we improve? And see, I always compare professional development for teachers like the professional development that a mechanic needs. You could be fixing cars for the last 50 years, but the engines have changed. So if you're still fixing cars like the way the engines were 50 years ago, you're not going to be able to fix these cars that are coming into your garage. And maybe you'll luck out and you'll become a specialist if that car comes in, but there's not a lot of them on the road anymore. You look at the 65 Mustangs, that car with that engine is not on the road anymore. And you still have to upgrade it to make sure it meets certain specs and parameters and rules of society. Now with professional development, the same thing is that I'm a 30-year veteran. I've been teaching. I started back in the 90s, and I've lived through, the multiple intelligence cooperative learning movement. I've lived through No Child Left Behind. I've lived through Common Core. I've worked through all that, but I'm always learning, and I'm always learning something new. And I never walk in and say, I know everything. This is the way. No, this is a way. And that ego is huge, especially with leaders, because I can't tell you how many times I get leaders who go, Eric, I could do what you do. Or, you know what, I know all about depth of knowledge. Or, yeah. And it's like, great. What do you know? Well, I know this. And if I tell them, okay, well, that's the way we've been taught and told, there's new information about it, all of a sudden now you're challenging them. And that's that whole thing behind rethink, is that we need to rethink and reconsider why we know how we know what we know. And we always need to change. And that's where ego gets in the way of the leader.
It's funny how people in leadership believe they can just do anything. I always say here in Phoenix, Arizona, there's a leadership traffic jam in education. Everyone thinks they can be the leader and they can't. You and I talked about this the other day, how people, no, actually it wasn't you, it was someone else who called me up and said, hey, I want to be a vice principal. I started researching. Can you give me some knowledge to kind of keep moving forward? So my number one question to him was, why do you want to be a leader?
Mm-hmm. I do that too with people who do. Yeah.
And he started listing things, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting. Money was in his top three, so he kept going. Then he finally said it. I want to make an impact. I want to help others. I go, right. That's why you want to get into the assistant principalship. You want to get in. The money's going to be there. You're going to work your butt off for that money. So don't go in for the money, because if you're going just for the money, you're going to fail. Going for the purpose. Going for the purpose, not the paycheck.
Exactly. And that's actually what I say, because I get a lot of calls about people like, hey, Eric, I want to do what you do. I want to be an education consultant. I want to be an author. I say, why? Well, I want to travel. Okay, that's a result. Well, I want to make more money. That's a result. Well, I think schools need to. No, that's your reason. Okay, what is your reasoning? And when I tell people what that means is, let's say you didn't get to be a professional development specialist or author or consultant. Would you still live your reasoning? Would you still live by your reasoning and why you do, how you do, what you do? And if they say yes, and they can basically, tell you what it is, that it's not about them. Like, I'll tell you, my why is to ensure that teaching and learning is standards driven and student supportive, so that the experience is academic, active, effective, and authentic for all. That sounds like a lot, but that's coming from my cerebral cortex. And that's found in Simon Sinek. Find your why, start with why. Everyone has a thing, what's your why? It's like, well, wait a minute. That's not so easy to just say my why is this, because a lot of times our why gets muddled with the result we want and the reasons we do it. It's our reasoning for being. So even if I was not an author, even if I was not, if Maverick Education, if I stopped doing work, if say I went back to the classroom, that would still be my reasoning for why I do, how I do, what I do. And if you notice, it's not about me, it's about what I'm doing for others.
Very good. And my why is helping people think about life deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that, and really getting into that piece there with leadership, with inspiration. Those are my two go-tos. I really have a lot of passion in those areas. I still have a lot to learn, but I right now have a lot to share while I'm learning. So what
Right.
would be your current issues, concerns, frustrations with high road leadership?
I would say, if all honesty, the inability and unwillingness to commit to long-term professional learning and growth. Um, I think that's the hardest part. The one and done does not work.
Right.
And having me come in and do a professional development one day, 6 hours, sometimes even as less as 2 hours. I want to really meet the person who said, "Oh, you should provide PD during people's prep hours," because that is not effective at all. I want to just smack that person in the side of their head, because now they're coming in with a grudge because you took away their time.
Yep.
I would say the thing is understanding that, rethinking and change and growth does not happen in a day, and you need to have it grow out. I mean, quality professional development takes years. And I think that's the thing, is that we want this so quick, and we want to get the scores up by the end of the semester, end of the year. I totally get it, because that letter grade that we get is basically so essential. It's like we can say, "Hey, our school got an A." Well, number one, what did that mean? And number two, is that A really an A, or did you get an A because someone lowered the cut scores and you're still at 60, 50% proficiency? Well, it's not that what you did this year, it's what are you going to do next year? What are you going to do 3 years from now? What are you going to do 5 years from now? That's the thing, the long-term commitment. The other frustration, I would say, that's hard for high road leadership is that, unfortunately, sometimes we listen to the loudest people, not the largest group of people who want the professional development. And unfortunately, the loudest people are the people who are resistant to it. So when I come in and maybe 5 or 10 people say, "Oh, I didn't like that. I didn't like him." Of course you didn't. I was there for one day for 2 to 6 hours. What kind of impression can I make on you? And I feel rushed to do that. And then you just stop. That's, I think, the frustrating thing, is that, we abandon these initiatives. Well, that didn't work, or they didn't like that, so let's go to the next thing. And that's not the way you do professional learning. Professional learning should be consistent, it should be sustainable, and it should be supported, and it should be systematic. And what I'm even trying to do with my professional learning that I do is, I just had a conversation with yesterday because they wanted me to come and present for a number of schools and teachers all at one time. And I said, who are the ones who are willing and wanting to listen, lead, and learn? And I said, go find
Nice.
that out. I'll train them, and then they can train the other people. It's actually a theory. I shared it with you before, the diffusions of innovation, where you want to find who the early adopters are, who are willing, wanting to listen, lead, and learn. And those are the ones who are going to make the movement. That's true leadership. When you can inspire someone to go and take the initiative within your organization, be it either you're at the head organization or you're outside the organization, and you can turn into something organic. But that's been the frustration, is that people just want me to come in. Sometimes I feel like what I like to say is put a Band-Aid on an amputation, and that doesn't work.
When do you think bad leadership has taken that turn to be bad? Is it 10 years ago, 30 years ago? What's really kind of turned a corner in leadership to make it where people question it now?
I would say the politics. I
Okay.
would say the politics within the organization, and I would say the politics that are coming down upon the education agencies and organizations from I'm not going to say federal government because I think the federal government has backed off a bit. Once upon a time, we can say, there was a strong overreach with it, during No Child Left Behind. But I think a lot of it, what happened is with the Every Student Succeeds Act, when they said, okay, we're going to give you a lot of reprieve from the federal mandates, and now the states can decide. I don't see a lot of agendas coming from state departments that are pedagogical. I see that they're more political motivated. Talking about issues, talking about things. It's not about kids learning from the state departments. I'm going to be very bold and say that. We're here in Arizona, and I'll be bold enough to say I don't think it's pedagogical. I think it's more about political, and I think it's also personal philosophy. I think that kids should learn like this. No, it's not. I think kids should learn like this. That's your reason again. Your reasoning is, why are you doing this? And basically, if it's working for kids, then why do we try to force them in a way that we may not agree with, or we may not see eye to eye with? Within organizations, I don't know if the best people are being hired to the top spots. I don't know if the best people are really becoming who they should be in terms of leading the organization. And if someone gets offended by this, I apologize, but maybe I'm not talking to you. But there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things going on out there, Anthony, that concerns me. There are a lot of great leaders who are being marginalized, and they're being marginalized because they're good at
Yes.
what they do. They either have the knowledge of pedagogy, or they're able to establish relationships. The super leader, as I like to call it, is the one who can do both. The one who can basically, push forward pedagogy, but also get people on board. I have seen a lot of them get hampered, and I've actually been a victim of it, because they'll bring me into the district and they'll champion me, and then all of a sudden they'll get a new superintendent or someone above them, and they're like, well, that's not what I thought, and that's not what I want, so I'm going to throw you out, and then I'm going to throw Erik out too. And it's like, but it was working for kids. It's not about us. And I think that's that selflessness we need. I think it's like, it's not about what I think, it's about what I can do and what people need. And I think that's where the bad leadership came, when it became more political,
Yes.
when it became divisive. I think when it became almost like I just remember, even like, it was around 2000, I think around late 2000, early 2010s. It was about cracking the quote old boys network. What did that mean? And then all of a sudden, the old boys network got cracked. But instead of saying changing it, it was almost like some people went on a revenge kick. It's like, now it's payback. The Empire Strikes Back. And really, it's like looking at it to say, if someone is not hurting kids, then why are you preventing them and oppressing them from basically to being the best that they can be, that serving the community the best they can? And if you don't have to like them, that's okay. We don't have to agree. That's okay. But that's the thing, is that what are we doing in the best interest of kids? I remember that was pounded in my head in my administrative training. And I remember when I stopped being an administrator, partly was because I never felt like anything we were doing was in the best interest of kids.
Audience, you can tell both of us have an educational field background, so we're kind of leaning that way when we talk about leadership. But all of these components can apply to business leadership, medical leadership, and so forth.
Right.
You are right. You are right. People come into leadership. Ego is a hell of a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Power,
Mm-hmm.
authority, influence is a hell of a drug. And they come in not saying, who's this for? And we're talking now about the education field. Who is this for? Oh, this is for the betterment of kids. And they come in with their personal agendas and they push those things instead of saying, is my personal agenda better for kids? And most of the time it's not. So they have to step back and say, what can I do to negotiate or change or shift my mindset to help kids and not bring in my ego, my power, my agenda? So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Employees are beyond frustrated with poor pay, lack of leadership, very little resources, dwindling support. How can leaders rebuild employee confidence, influence, and impact?
Ooh, that's a good one. I got to tell you, the thing that really transformed me was I read the 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. And what that showed me was how you deal with people. And I loved how he talked about there's four different types of people, that there were people who you could say, I want you to do this. And that person goes, I'm on it, and you got it. I'm that type of person where you say, I want you to do this, you need to do this, and I want you to start this way, and this is how it should turn out. Because if you said to me, I want you to do this, and you don't give me parameters, okay, then I'm just going to go and do it. Then don't come back and say, you didn't do it the way that I wanted you to do it. You need to communicate that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got the person who you got to hold their hand and go, now I know you can do this. I know this is hard. But then you got the other person where you have to look at them and go, hey, are you doing this? I think it really depends upon the profession, the organization. And I really think that what a lot of people want who are basically, I guess lack of a better word, the employees, the ones who are not the leaders, the ones who are in the trenches. Like, let me say if it's education, the teachers, what they want is support. And they want to have time to do what they do. And when we pull them and we give them these blanket professional developments that they may feel has nothing to do with them, or they listen to a motivational speaker and they're like, that's not how I get motivated, and we just do it blanketly, that's not effective. I really think what the leader needs to do is the leader needs to be the one who leads it, who believes in it, becomes what Malcolm Gladwell calls the mavens, the experts, the champions. I believe in it, and the connectors who knew how to who to talk to on their staff to push it forward and how to respond to them. I think they're the ones who should be having their skill set be trained and extended and expanded upon. And then they become the leaders who push forward the initiatives, make sure the culture. I mean, when you have these things where people do professional development on culture, we need to do this for the culture. And you're talking to everyone about the culture. Well, if you're not buying into that, then what you're just doing is that you're just basically telling someone, this is bad. This is how it can be good. You're doing it wrong. This is the way. And that's not the way it should do it. You should talk to the leaders, and the leaders should be the one who should be trained on it. And they're the ones who should be applying it. And they're the ones who are spreading it down and spreading it out. Because if you go in front and say, hey, your culture's this, your culture's that, if you're not doing this for kids and you're not doing, then something's wrong with you. That's not going to be effective. And preaching at somebody is not going to be effective. You need to really get the leaders to understand how they can take it, how they can embrace it. And then after that consultant or that speaker's gone, or even after that leader's gone, how can that continue to live beyond them?
It kind of connects, well, it does connect what you said earlier. When we have professional development, it's not about bringing a team together and going, bad, bad, bad. I'm going to teach you good, good, good. It's about we are growing. This is another opportunity for us to evolve, to move forward. This is what professional development is all about, that continual growth piece.
And that's important in an organization. So when I see people or I see organizations who are not willing to rethink, or the bad word, which is change, because you say,
Oh, yeah.
if you say to someone this, and I get this, and I go like this, I go, if I have to come in and go, you need to change, I'm going to get two things, no and why. Okay. And that comes from my early majority who says why, which I want them to say why, because then that's the communication. And the laggards who say no, that's a whole different thing. But if I come in to say, I'm going to ask you to rethink, the word I say often, if somebody's not willing to rethink or open their mind or reconsider, I say BlackBerry. And people go, why do you say BlackBerry? And I go, well, what do you think I mean by the BlackBerry? And they say, are you talking about the device? I go, yeah. And they said, well, what about it? And I go, well, where is it? And they go, it doesn't exist anymore. I go, exactly. Because they were not willing to rethink. BlackBerry, which was the top device out there, that was a status symbol, if you remember. Remember our administrators, back in the day, my BlackBerry, and you were in a BlackBerry network.
Mm-hmm.
One of the failures, and Adam Grant writes about this in his book, Think Again, one of the failures of BlackBerry is that they were not willing to go to open text to text they said, no, you have to stay in the BlackBerry network. Well, here comes Apple with the iPhone, which is not a phone, which is a computer that functions as a phone, and they allow all the carrier services. So now you get the product and you just choose your own service. That's what put them out of business. The one that's really almost at the point of BlackBerry, and I'm wondering about this, I'm going to be saying this in 2 years, is Peloton. Because Peloton, they live and die by that bike. And they live and die by the fact that everybody wants to buy the bike. You got to have the bike. You don't. You can have the app and buy and use the app on any bike. You don't need that bike, but they live and die saying, no, you need the Peloton bike. And if they put too much into that, they're going to go under, because it's, and that's the thing. You also have to look at it in terms of your organization. And that's, again, looking at when we call to the infinite game that I was telling you about that the other day with Simon Sinek wrote. And one of the great stories he says is this, is that he tells a story about Microsoft, and it was during the MP3 development, and Microsoft created the Zune. And the purpose was to make a better MP3 player than the iPod. And that was their finite game. That's the end goal. And they did. Okay. But when Simon Sinek went to the C-level executives of Apple and said, hey, you know what? Microsoft created this thing called the Zune, and it's really good. I mean, this thing is better than the iPod. Apple said it probably is. And that's that infinite game, because when you put it out there, you have to say, this is what it is now, but I'm not done. And I worry about that with schools. I worry that about schools like, I got an A this year. Great. You got an A this year. Even sometimes teachers, my kids were high scores, proficient. That was last year. This is this year. What's going on? And you see that from a sports mentality. And I say that to some people. I say, well, who was in the Super Bowl last year? And I say, you know, I remember I was working in school, and this one person was just basically, my scores were great last year. Now they're not good this year. And she even basically moved up with her students, but they're not good this year. So she blamed her students. But her scores were great last year, and she lived on that. And I told the principal who was struggling to, you know, help them with that. I said, well, who was in the Super Bowl last year? And she said, the LA Rams. I go, well, who is it this year? She goes, not the LA Rams. I go, exactly. So it's not what you did now. It's that you can take it and say, great, I'm on top, but it's hard to stay on top, and it's hard to go higher. And you got to figure out that, you know, I'm great now, but what can I do better? And we talked about that with schools. If you're getting an A for your school, which is great, and your teachers probably worked hard, your kids worked hard, great. But you got 60% of your kids or 50% of your kids who are grade level according to that assessment. Now you're going into next year with 40% of your kids who are not at grade level, probably plus or minus 10 of that 50 or 60%. We just got lucky. And we have this thing called summer vacation where poof, everything's gone. And we have that learning loss, which is not a pandemic thing. So what are we doing to basically sustain? What are we doing to grow? What are we doing to say, if that third grader is proficient now, what are they going to look like in sixth grade? What are they going to look like in ninth grade? How do I keep that momentum going so that we can show growth? And if we do dip, we need to figure out where that dip was and why.
I want to add also to the BlackBerry issue this word, Blockbuster.
Exactly.
How they wouldn't change, and Netflix took them over,
Right.
and they were stubborn. So yeah, it's so that PD, our professional development, is important to evolve, grow, look at things differently, maybe bring the data back. I love the analogy you just said. A teacher had great scores last year, but what about this year? And then when you start blaming the kids, that's not leadership. That should be you looking in the mirror, having that self checkout moment. Okay, how come last year I was able to move kids, but not this year? And you can't go, well, it's a different set of kids. Yep, every year you're going to have a different set of kids. So what are you going to do to evolve and change and kind of be flexible for that new batch of kids or that new classroom of kids?
Well, that's the other thing about leadership, because if you're leading, and this is a big thing in teaching, if you're teaching and the kids are not getting it, okay, that's on you.
That's on you. Yep.
that's on, I have to do that for professional development. Could you imagine what would happen to me if I went back and I said to the principal, yeah, you know what, your teacher just can't do this? I mean, and we have, sometimes we hear, and I'm not bashing teachers and I'm not saying all teachers, but I just want to make the point is that this is the goal and we have to achieve that goal and we need to figure out how to achieve that goal. I was just talking with someone and they were worried about standards changing next year. And they're like, I don't know how these kids are going to do it. The minute you said that,
You're
all of a
done.
sudden, you're done. You're done. It's not, I
You're
don't
done.
know how these kids are going to do it. Now it's like, all right, now how can I get the kids to do it? I like to compare it to like when you have a standards-based, a standards-driven learning system. The standard is the finish line in a race, okay? And our races are defined by our finish line. A dash is this level, an obstacle course is this, an American Ninja is this, and a triathlon is this. If you don't think that student can run that race and not just win it, you don't have to win it in education. You need to complete it. You need to reach the finish line. But if you don't think that student can, and if you basically say, oh, you know, this is just impossible, then they're not going to do it. But this is the race they have to run. Well, that's not fair. You're right. So what can we do to make it that they can be capable to it or do the best that they can or figure it out? And they may not be able to do it in the time frame we have, and they may not be able to do it in the way we teach or train them, but how could they do it?
What would be a bold change then to help people who are listening evolve into bold leadership? Because to me, right now, we have a lot of what I call scaredy cat leadership going on. Actually, my next book is called Scaredy Cat Leadership.
That's
And
good.
um, because I'm just tired of these leaders just being so scared. One of these new things out there is I don't want to make a decision because if it's wrong, it comes back on me. Well, that's what leadership's about, making those decisions, gathering the best information possible and making the best decision. If you're at 80% approval rate for your decisions or correct rate with your decisions, you're doing well. So because every decision is not going to be right, so I'm just tired of this scaredy cat leadership. So what are some or one bold thing someone can start utilizing to become a bold or a high road leader?
First thing you got to ask is why. Why are we doing this?
There you go.
Why are we doing this? I'm actually asking that in my trainings now because I work a lot with academic standards. And I say, you unwrap the standards. Well, how do you do it? They say, well, you have to identify the verbs and identify the nouns. Why? You're right, but why? Because that tells you what the kids have to do. And that tells you what the kids have to know and understand. And how do you do it? You circle the verbs, you underline the nouns. Well, you're right, but why? Why do we do it that way? I don't know. That's the way it's always been done. Well, that was the way that was introduced to us when we had No Child Left Behind standards that only assess skills and stuff. But now we have these, what they're now calling next generation learning standards and what were formerly college and career ready or the bad branding of Common Core, were that these standards were not cognitive or content based, they were contextual. So you need to not just look at the nouns and verbs, you need to look at all the words that follow that verb that says what exactly and how deeply do I have to think about it or know it or learn it. So why are we doing this? And that's the first thing. And you have to be, courageous enough, curious enough, and also basically care enough to ask why. Why are we doing it this way? Are you going to get people who are going to get upset? Yes, because there are a lot of people who find comfort in consistency. They don't want to make waves. And unfortunately, that does not cause change. That's the first thing. The other thing is that you need to make sure that the way you're communicating it, it's not, this is what I want, this is what I think, this is what I believe. It's more so about, hey, what if we did this? So approaching it with questions. I have a friend who, she was telling me about appreciative inquiry, which is really a great concept out there about using questions, about starting with a question and focusing on strengths based versus, because a lot of times when we do things, we go, okay, well, what if we did this? Okay, yeah. Now, why won't it work? Well, we know why it won't work, and we know what will happen if it doesn't work. It doesn't work, but what if it does? And that's what leadership is. It's about risk. And sometimes there is a consequence that's negative. sometimes positive. You see this in the film industry now. You see this, like, there isn't really anything that isn't safe out there, and people are bored of it. And they just actually did something on a podcast about, they're talking about the way movies are these days, that movies are either a comic book adaptation that from a studio that bought the comic book company and then are turning into films, or they get what's called IPs, which is like, how many Transformer movies do you make, or how many sequels or series that you make. It's very, or you have like the filmmakers like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. They say, okay, we're going to make this film. We're going to put it together. Matt Damon's going to star in it. Ben Affleck's going to direct it. Maybe he'll star in it. Do you want it? No. Okay, we'll take it down the street. Or Christopher Nolan says, you're going to come to my house. You're going to read Oppenheimer. If you want it, great. We're not changing it. There's nothing risky out there right now. There isn't anyone pushing boundaries. Everything is safe in terms of a business. And again, it's like the school, because I can recoup that big box office that first week. It looks like I'm successful, but then the second week I slumped down 67%. Well, it doesn't matter. It looks like I had a big opening. That's like the school says, hey, I got an A. Yes, my kids, 50% of them or 60% of them are proficient in literacy and math, but my school got an A. Okay, that doesn't mean you're being successful. That doesn't mean you've taken a bold chance on something. If we don't take chances, if we don't take risks, we won't grow. And if we just stay, complacent and keep in a status of homeostasis, then we get frustrated because the world changed around us and we're keeping on doing what we're doing. And it might have worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, but it ain't working now. So what are we going to do about it?
Well said. Getting to that why out of the gates and really having a why, not a reason, like you said, not an end result. I love those words. What is your favorite quote on leadership?
Mine is, never let the fear of striking out getting in your way.
Nice.
That.
Oh, Babe Ruth, you said?
Yeah. And it's also like, paraphrase, I mean, Sylvester Stallone wrote this in Rocky Balboa. It ain't how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you get hit and how you keep moving forward. And that's the thing, is that basically, don't be afraid of not being successful. But at the same time, when you get hit, when you hit hard and you get hit back harder, can you bounce back? Can you learn from that and say, why did I get hit that way? Okay, what do I got to do to make sure that I don't get hit that way again? So those are my two best leadership quotes.
Gotcha. Mine, if I can remember off the top of my head, by Dr. Martin Luther King, the time is always right to do right. It's either I got it or I'm slightly off there. So right. I really like that. How about this one? What is one habit you believe every leader should cultivate to become a high road leader?
Humility.
There you go.
Bold humility. It's not, and that's something I've even have to learn, and maybe even some of your listeners are chuckling because, Eric, you don't present yourself as humble. No, I present myself as confident. Yeah, I'm confident in my abilities. Okay, I know when I'm arrogant, and I know it comes from my insecurity. If I'm feeling insecure, then boom, my chest starts puffing out, and I start speaking with a little more swagger. You might even hear my New York accent come out. Okay, that's my arrogance. But I am confident in why I know how I know what I know, but I'm always willing to learn. And I think one of the things is I'm willing to say I'm wrong. And some people get frustrated because they say to me, Eric, you just don't listen to me. You don't agree with me. And I'm like, you're right. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't agree with you. We can still be friends. And they get frustrated because they think I'm not listening to them. I did. I just don't agree with them. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And you have to hear it if you're wrong. I think I told you a story. One of the most prominent education presenters and writers out there came up to me in a conference, and I wrote about something in my book. And he said to me, I want to talk to you about something in your book. And I said, okay. He goes, well, you said that this thing I created does this. It scaffolds. And I said, yeah, I thought I read that. He goes, no, it doesn't scaffold. It doesn't scaffold like that. So you're not right in your book. Now I could have gotten like haughty about it. But you know what I said? I said, wow, I apologize that I must have gotten misinformation. I'll make sure when the next edition comes out, that's out of there. Number two, thank you for teaching me something new. Number three, whoa, you read my book?
Right.
That's that humility. I just encountered somebody who is someone who's a leader in our field, and they were misrepresenting depth of knowledge, and I was getting some calls about them. And I think I told you this story, and I'll share it out, loud of it. I contacted them. I said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm getting some calls about this because it's my area of expertise. I have some, concerns. Just trying to keep the message consistent. I would love to collaborate and connect with you." Well, they took it as a personal insult that I was insulting their professionalism or insulting their professional capability, which had nothing to do with it. Blocked me on Twitter. Decided to send my email out to other people to say, "Hey, I'm thinking this guy is insulting me. Is he right?" And of course, everyone bobbleheads because you stick up for your friends. And basically, he was very dismissive towards me, and I was disappointed because I respected this person. I think we're in this to listen and learn from each other. And I'm sorry I ticked him off. But the unprofessionalism of sharing this with other people. What do you think about this and everything? Am I something wrong with it? And I get that, but for to come back and even say that to me, that's not leadership. That's pompous.
Yes.
That's pompous arrogance. And I get concerned because if I'm wrong, then I need to make sure that I'm providing the accurate message. And if you're telling me I'm wrong, I had the creator of Depth of Knowledge. He said it's not meant to be for a method and model for teaching and learning. He didn't agree with it. I said, okay, but this is what I did with it. And he goes, well, you kind of took my stuff and you turned it into this. So it's really not mine anymore. It's kind of what you did with it. And that humility. Well, I'm not about to call this Francis's DOK levels. Can I just call them the DOK levels? And he said, fine. We can agree to disagree, but we also need to learn from each other. And I don't think I have a hard time when I see leaders who don't listen and who don't look at that opening. We're experiencing that right now with a bunch of things, not only nationally, but also in our state, where you say to someone, say, hey, this is not happening. Yes, it is. You're so dead set that you're not listening. You're not listening to the other side. And it took me a long time and a lot of age to get off my high horse, to stop being so arrogant, to not take the title to my name. When I became an assistant principal, I remember I got my placard, assistant principal, my name in gold and everything. And then Erik Francis, when you say he's an international author, educator, and I still got to pay for my Starbucks. It's not title. It's not what I know. I like to quote Batman Begins. It's not who I am, but what I do that defines me.
Nice.
And that's the thing. It's not Erik Francis. I mean, there's people out there talking about DOK. It's a tribute to my work. And I look at my dad was the same way because he was one of the leaders of the American Civil Rights Movement for Disabled. We talk about this. And he never got the accolades that he deserved or the spotlight that he deserved. But he did so many things. And I remember he used to go like this. He goes, you see that over there? Yeah, I made that happen. And he could talk to me about that. And that's what true leadership is. It's not your title. It's not who you are. It's what happens when you're there. But most importantly, what happens when you're not there anymore.
It's a result of your leadership. You being there or you not being there. I love your examples of someone had pulled you aside and said XYZ. You said, I apologize. Thank you for reading my book. I will, in the next edition, take that out. Where the other example was the fella who you were trying to help. He got all frantic. He went to his friends. That's what we're talking about, folks. That's leadership. Someone who says, okay, my fault. I'm being humble here. I will correct that in the future, versus someone who is giving some constructive criticism and then they panic. They run off to get validation from friends who are not going to say no and flame the fire even more. So that's what we're talking about. What type of leader are you going to be? What book would you recommend people start reading out of the gates? I know there's a lot of great books. What is one book that you recommend to help people become high road leaders?
Think Again by Adam Grant. That
Okay.
book was so transformational to me. And I read it on accident. everyone in education is recommending Hidden Potential, which is another great Adam Grant book. And I was like, oh, I got an Adam Grant book in my Audible. I'll go listen to it on my trips. And the person who recommended it, I called him up. I said, hey, man, thanks for recommending Think Again. That was such a great book. It transformed me not only professionally, but also personally. He goes, oh, yeah, that's a great book, too. I go, what do you mean that's a great book, too? And he said, I recommended Hidden Potential, but that's a great book, too. I really think, especially in education, we all really need to read Think Again, because what Adam Grant says, the true measure of intelligence is not the ability to think and learn, but to rethink and unlearn. And that to me was powerful. And you see this in education because the way it's always been done. And you know, we have these things that are set in education and we don't know why we do how we do what we do. Why do we do homework? Because that's the way it's always been done. Why do we give these assessments the way we give? Because that's the way we always been done. Why do we grade the way we do? Because that's the way we always been done. And it's also what we understand. But is that the best way? Is there a better way? And I think that book really, not only from a leadership, but also from a personal standpoint, everybody really needs to read that book, Think Again by Adam Grant.
Nice. And what was the second book you had mentioned by him?
Hidden Potential is more about that everyone has these gifts and talents and we need to recognize and realize them. It's you know, that it's more of that, but Grant's book on Think Again, that really is from not just a professional, but also from a personal standpoint. The other one is, and you have to watch out sometimes, Anthony, because some people get these things and they become not so much meaningful, but they become these mantras. And they become pretty much as deep and resounding as the posters you see at Home Goods, you know, where, you know, you got that frame pretty poster that says live, laugh, love. Oh, yes, I can live by that. You know, no, you know, when you read Start With Why or Find Your Why by Simon Sinek, I read that during the pandemic when I got torpedoed because I had to redefine who I was and why I was. And that really helped me as well. Like, why? What's my reasoning? Why am I doing this? Okay. So when people say, you know, you need to find your why, you need to do this, and they do these presentations on it, they're more motivational. That's not like this, I'm coming up in front of you, I'm going to share some stories with you. That takes a lot of deep-seated introspect and reflection to say, why am I doing this? You know, I like to compare it to like superheroes. Why am I putting on that cape and cowl? You know, why am I going out there at night and risking my life, you know, to do this? Why am I putting on that armor to do this? Why am I putting on, you know, to go and fight crime or put on a bat costume to do this? That's the why. But you just can't do it to say, you know, the motivation. And that's the thing, is that it's really should be about introspection. Why am I doing this? Why am I in this career? You know, like that movie Up in the Air, where the people get laid off and they don't know what to do. And he's like sitting there going, you know, you says here you were a chef. Yeah. Well, did you ever think to go back? No, I'm too old. No, you're never too old.
Right.
You know, what's your why? Why are you doing? But the problem is that we take these things sometimes and we make these deep, resounding, meaningful messages, these home goods poster mantras. And, you know, it's beyond painting it on a wall or having a poster or saying it. You gotta live it. It's not who I am. It's what I do that defines me. And if you're not doing it, then it's just empty words.
You are the author of 3 books. I'm going to put them up here now. Inquiry Minds, Want to Learn, Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge. And now that's a good question. How to promote cognitive rigor through classroom questioning. These books, how can they help people start with that high road leadership?
Well, the questioning book is about when you ask questions, why are you asking questions? And it's not to basically assess what somebody knows. It's to activate, advance, and augment what they know. You're asking them a question not to, you know, answer, but to prompt them to reflect before responding. And you don't have to have an answer. So that's more so the questioning books. Depth of knowledge is a concept, and I kind of taken it where I call it a concept, framework, and language for learning. So you're asking not so much, well, how deeply do you have to think about this? Or what are you thinking? Or what do you know? It's like, what exactly and how deeply do you have to comprehend and communicate your knowledge and thinking and learning? So from a leadership standpoint, it's for the questioning book, how can you get questioning and use inquiry? And again, talk about a friend of mine who she does, her name is Jen Osger. She does appreciative inquiry, and using that to really get people thinking about why we do what we do, what we're doing, where are we going with this, and how can we go down what she calls that the trail to success. And depth of knowledge is just, what if there's just 4 ways you can basically comprehend and communicate your learning? You can either answer, which is a level 1. You can explain or express with examples. That's a level 2, teach it to others. Level 3 is you either justify or verify with evidence, or conclude, consider, and critique based on evidence. And level 4 is you explore and extend for an extended purpose or over an extended period. So that's in terms of leadership, where you're saying, okay, do we just want the answers? That's a level 1. Do we want to know how and why that's the answer? That's a level 2. Do we want to know what if this happened? What could happen? What might happen? Is it this or that? That's a level 3. What else could we do with it? Or how could we use this in our own innovative and inventive way? That's a level 4. So that's how my books would help. They're more about teaching, but leading, it's also basically, when you're teaching, you're leading, and when you're learning, you're leading. So how can I ask questions to learn? How can I use questions to learn? And what's the answer I need? Do I just need an answer? That's a level 1. Do I need an explanation? That's a level 2. Do I need some sort of justification or consideration? That's a level 3. And do I need to do an exploration or extension? That's a level 4.
Nice, nice, nice. Where can people purchase these? Are they on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles?
They are on Amazon. A lot of times education books don't go into the Barnes and Noble store, but they are on the Barnes and Noble website.
Okay.
Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge and Inquiring Minds Want to Learn. They're from Solution Tree. So you go to solutiontree.com. The DOK one is solutiontree.com/true DOK. And Inquiring Minds Want to Learn is solutiontree.com/inquiring minds. Now that's a good question. It was from ASCD. Now it's interesting because I wrote that back in 2016. It's still selling. I'm proud to say I just got a thing where it says your book has sold 15,000 copies. And
Whoa!
yeah, and that's the thing for education. Like, a lot of people think like these aren't John Grisham and Stephen King and James Patterson books. Okay? If your book makes a few thousand, you're pretty good. Okay, 10,000 is considered to be a bestseller. Sometimes they set some parameters like, well, if you sell 10,000 the first year, that's really hard, and they really got to sell that. But I'm proud to say that that book has really lasted. But these are the two, Depth of Knowledge, Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge, Inquiring Minds Want to Learn. These are the books I wrote post-pandemic that will hopefully help people understand what society has become, what our students have become, and how we can, reach them by teaching them and teach them by reaching them.
What are some final thoughts for people? Some input you may have with this topic, high road leadership.
We need to have hope, and we need to have a goal, and we need to have belief. Okay. And that is really the big things. We need to have hope, to say with hopes this happens. We have to have a concrete goal. What do we want to happen? And again, it's not that finite game, it's that infinite game. We know that we want to be successful now, but we also want to be successful 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And also the belief that we can be successful, that anyone can be successful. I believe a lot in personal choice, and I believe a lot in personal motivation. I believe anyone can do anything if they want to, and if they put their mind to it. And, like Jack Nicholson says in that movie, what is this, as good as it gets? Then it's as good as it gets, but you have to be the one who decides that. And I think sometimes as parents, and I think sometimes as teachers, that we have kind of a bias, because as parents, we know our kids can do better. And as teachers, we know our kids can do better. But put it to the kids, say, did you really give it your best? Because if you did, then that's what you get. And that's your best. And that's fine. You did your best. Do you think you can do better? Okay, let's work on that. Because if I said to you, hey, you can do better. Okay, no, that's me saying it. There might be some reason why you can't do it better. And that's in you, not because of your circumstance, not because of everything, but something inside you is telling you you can't do it better. So my job would be as a leader to say, you're doing great. How could you do it better? Well, I don't want to do better. Okay, that's your choice. And I think that's the big thing. That's a big thing we need to do, not just in corporate world, but especially definitely in education.
I appreciate your words. I want to echo some of your words. Start, folks, with that why. It's not your end result. It's not your reason. It's your why are you wanting to be a high road leader? And remember, it's not about you. It's about the folks. And then I want to add what Eric had mentioned, humility. Be humble with your leadership. Be humble, not cocky, not arrogant, but just be humble and lead with confidence. And some are going to get tripped up with that confidence versus cocky. And they will know if it's confidence. The negative people will push it as cocky, and that's on them, not you. Be confident, approach, be well prepared, and just have fun with leadership. Make it happen. It shouldn't be painful. It should be purposeful. Yes. Eric, where can people contact you?
Well, I have a website. It's Maverick, Maverik, no C in Maverick. I'm not Tom Cruise. Maverik, education.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Maverick, Maverik, edu12. You can also email me at Erik, Erik, at Maverick, Maverik, education.com. And I want to piggyback, if I can, on what you just said about cockiness, is that it's really funny because other people will call you that. And what I have found is when people call you cocky, or people call you arrogant, or people call you sarcastic, or people call you that, that's on them. That's not on you, because you know your intent, you know your purpose, you know why you did, how you did, what you did. Now, if somebody says that, take that as a reflection, as I didn't get my point across to that person, and find out why and try to understand why, but also understand maybe they just not having a good day, or maybe you remind them of somebody in their past who hurt them, or somebody who's currently hurting them, or maybe something else going on in your life. If you know you're not being cocky and arrogant, and you're maybe cockiness, you can be fun, and people think, oh, you're cocky. No, I'm trying to have fun, right. Or right. I know my stuff. Well, that's arrogant. No, that's confidence. Okay.
Yeah, and that's being prepared.
Yeah. If I have to tell you I know my stuff, that's arrogant. If I show you I know my stuff, that's
yes. There you go. Great point there.
Yeah.
It's funny how you present and I present, how when we're standing there, we can feel this from the audience. Some people we're too much for. Others were just right, and they appreciate, and they're listening and learning and taking notes. They want to talk to you afterwards. So audience, it's going to always be a mixed bag. People, not 100% will like you all the time, but if you're not cocky but confident, and you're really well prepared, and you know your content, and you're projecting it in a way where it's engaging and active, people will learn. So just accept that some people will love you and some people will not.
Thank you. Better thing to say about that, there's an old saying, and it was from a movie. I said, I think it was from A Bronx Tale, where he goes, would you rather be loved or feared? Okay. And I remember that statement. I remember Chaz Palminteri's guy said, I'd rather be feared. Well, fear is a fear, and you're scared until you don't have to be scared anymore. It's like when Goliath, David threw the rock in Goliath's nose. Now Goliath's not so scared anymore. Love comes from a place of emotion and attachment, and the opposite of love is hate. Okay. So if someone loves you and you do something, now they've got an emotional response. I like to say, when someone says, would you rather be loved or feared? I'd rather be respected, which means that you don't need to love me. You don't need to be afraid of me. Just respect me for who I am, how I am, what I am. You can disagree with me, but be respectful about it. And I will too. It's kind of like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. I want you to be nice till it's time not to be nice. When's that?
Movie. He was smooth. He was smooth.
When we know that, you won't. I'll let you know. So but I think I think it's more so, and I think that's the problem, even with our leaders, even at the highest level, we're not respecting each other. When I have to bash you for you, that's not respectful. If I criticize you for something you did, that's different. But if I bash you, for why you are, how you are, what you are, that's not respectful. So you don't have to like me, but please respect me because I am someone.
We should be uplifting each other.
Yes.
Everyone can be a winner. Everyone can get paid. And again, folks, it's not about a paycheck. It should be about purpose and passion in your leadership. The money will come and it will be there. Thank you
Mhm.
so much. Everyone, reach out to Erik. He's an author, educator, presenter. He's not only national, but international. And he has his 3 books out there. Purchase a couple copies. Thank you so much, Erik, for your time. I know you're super busy, so I'll let you go. If you can hang on, though, I would love to debrief, okay?
You got it. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we got the chance to do this. You and I have been colleagues and friends for years. We've gotten closer, and I just want you to know how much I respect you, and I feel honored that you had me on your show today.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words.
You're welcome.
Hold on one second here. Let's do a little closing.